The morning sun had barely breached the horizon over Boise, Idaho, on Monday, March 8, 2025, when I leaned in to kiss my wife, Samantha, goodbye. It was just shy of 8:30 a.m., but the day was already teetering on the edge of disaster, a quiet prelude to the chaos that would soon engulf me. For 15 years, Samantha had been my rock, my partner through life's unpredictable waves, a powerhouse in Boise's real estate scene whose relentless drive and hefty commissions had carved out a comfortable existence for us in a craftsman-style house nestled on the north end of town. "Have a great day, love," she chirped as she swept out the door, her auburn hair glinting in the faint light, her voice slipping into that syrupy, rehearsed tone she used with clients, a tone I'd come to loathe over the years. Her parting smirk, sharp and secretive, clung to my thoughts like a burr as I climbed into my truck, the engine rumbling to life as I headed for the office, my mind already wrestling with the stack of financial reports that loomed over my week like a storm cloud. The drive was a familiar blur, past the coffee shops flicking on their neon signs, the joggers pounding along the Boise River greenbelt. But that smirk festered, a silent alarm I couldn't silence. I pulled into the parking lot of Reed Financial at 7:45, the gravel crunching beneath my tires, the air crisp with the bite of early spring that lingered in the shadows of the foothills. My briefcase hit my desk with a dull thud, and I shuffled to the break room, desperate for the bitter kick of coffee to jolt me awake before I drowned in spreadsheets. That's when it struck. A searing, white-hot pain ripped through my groin, sharp and merciless, wrenching a ragged yell from my throat that echoed off the tiled walls. The mug slipped from my hand, shattering against the linoleum in a spray of dark liquid that splashed across my boots. My boss, Ethan Brooks, burst through the door, his usual easy grin replaced by wide-eyed alarm. "Nathan, what's wrong?" he demanded, crossing the room in 3 quick strides, his tie flapping loose from its knot. I tried to wave it off, to laugh it away as a cramp or a fluke, but my voice trembled as I described the burning sensation, the strange, greenish discharge we both noticed when I shifted in my chair, my face flushing with embarrassment. His jaw tightened, his hazel eyes narrowing with a mix of concern and resolve. "You're going to a doctor now. I'll handle your workload. Don't come back until you're sorted," he said, his tone ironclad, a rare edge of authority from a man I'd known since our college days splitting pitchers at the Ram. I nodded, dazed, my mind a tangle of shock and denial as I splashed cold water on my face at the sink, the icy sting doing little to clear the fog. I stumbled back to my desk, grabbed my keys, and muttered to the receptionist, "Out for a day, maybe more," her curious stare boring into my back as I fled the building, the weight of something dark and unspoken pressing against my ribs. Dr. Matthews, my regular physician, was a 40-minute trek across town, and I knew his schedule was a fortress of appointments, a puzzle I couldn't crack on short notice. Instead, I veered toward the urgent care on Fairview Avenue, its sterile white facade looming like a courthouse under the gray sky, promising answers I wasn't sure I wanted. The waiting room reeked of antiseptic and unease, the chairs hard and unforgiving as I checked in, my hands unsteady on the clipboard. The nurse took my samples with robotic precision, her gloved hands moving in silence, her face a blank slate as she pointed me to a seat among the sniffling patients and restless kids flipping through dog-eared magazines. The clock ticked with cruel indifference, each second amplifying the dread coiling in my gut, a cold sweat prickling my neck. After what felt like an eternity, but was only 35 minutes by the wall clock, a nurse's sharp voice sliced through the haze. "Nathan Reynolds?" She stood in the doorway, her expression a mask of indifference, gesturing me into an exam room with a flick of her wrist, her clipboard tucked under her arm like a verdict. I sat on the paper-covered table, the crinkle beneath me loud in the stillness as she took my vitals, blood pressure spiking to 140/90, temperature stubbornly normal despite the heat flushing my cheeks. She scribbled on her chart, avoiding my eyes, her pen scratching like a judge's gavel sealing my fate. "Doctor'll be in," she said curtly, then vanished, leaving me alone with the antiseptic sting of the air and the questions clawing at my mind. A knock jolted me from my spiraling thoughts, and Dr. Leonard Hayes stepped in, a wiry, middle-aged man with salt and pepper hair and a no-nonsense air that matched his starched white coat. He flipped open a manila folder and fixed me with a steady gaze, his brown eyes sharp behind wire-rimmed glasses. "Mr. Reynolds, your tests show gonorrhea," he said, his voice flat, cutting through the silence like a guillotine. The word hit like a sledgehammer, knocking the breath from my lungs, my vision tunneling as the room tilted. "Gonorrhea," I echoed, my voice a hollow rasp, as if repeating it could erase the truth, could dissolve it into the sterile air. "Yes, a sexually transmitted disease," he said, his tone clipped, his eyes flickering with something like suspicion, as if I'd invited this curse into my life. "I'm prescribing antibiotics, doxycycline, 1 course. No sexual activity for 7 days after you finish. If symptoms persist, see your primary care doctor," he continued, already scribbling on his pad, his pen moving with clinical detachment. My mind reeled, a chaotic swirl of disbelief and panic crashing over me like a tidal wave. An STD? Me? I'd only ever been with Samantha. 15 years of fidelity. A marriage I'd poured my soul into. A vow I'd kept even when temptation whispered in the quiet corners of our early years. The late nights at work when colleagues flirted over beers. Could my wife have it and not know? I asked, my voice trembling, grasping for any lifeline to make sense of this nightmare. Any thread to pull me back from the abyss. He softened slightly, adjusting his glasses as he met my gaze, a flicker of empathy breaking through his reserve. "It's possible. Women can mistake symptoms for a bladder infection or something minor. Discharge, irritation, mild pain. She needs to get tested immediately. Delaying could lead to pelvic inflammatory disease or worse, infertility if it spreads unchecked." He handed me a prescription slip, had me sign a stack of forms that blurred before my eyes, and sent me off with a brisk, "Take care of yourself, Mr. Reynolds." His tone a dismissal that left me staggering under the weight of a truth I couldn't unhear. I stumbled to my truck, the prescription crumpled in my fist, the weight of Dr. Hayes's words pressing down like a physical force I couldn't shake, a yoke around my neck. The parking lot was a haze of exhaust and muted sunlight as I climbed in, my hands trembling on the wheel, the keys jingling as I fumbled to start the engine. I called Ethan first, my voice barely steady as I braced for his reaction. The phone pressed hard against my ear. "Christ, Nathan, that's brutal," he said, his usual levity gone, replaced by a quiet shock that mirrored the tremor in my chest. "Your privacy's locked down with me. Take leave, come back when you're ready. I've got your reports covered," he assured me, his voice a lifeline in the chaos, a steady hand pulling me from the edge. "Thanks, man," I said, barely audible, ending the call with a shaky thumb, the screen blurring as my eyes stung with unshed tears. Next, my parents. I needed their anchor, their clarity, the unwavering support that had carried me through every storm. They'd raised me and my older sister, Emily, in a home where faith was the bedrock and secrets were anathema. A sanctuary of honesty I'd clung to all my life, a compass when the world spun wild. My dad's voice crackled through the line, warm and familiar, a balm against the raw ache. "Nathan, you at the office?" "No, Dad. Health issue. Can I come over?" "Need to talk to you and Mom," I said, my throat tight, the words sticking like gravel. His tone shifted, concern threading through it like a taut wire, a father's instinct kicking in. "The girls okay?" "They're fine. Just not over the phone," I said, dodging the inevitable, buying time before the truth spilled out. "Get over here, then," he said, decisive, his voice a command softened by love. Coffee's brewing. The 20-minute drive to their ranch-style house in the foothills was a blur, my hands gripping the wheel as memories flooded in, a lifeline to a simpler time when trust was unshakable. Emily and I had grown up in a world of love and discipline. Sunday sermons at First Baptist, family dinners around a scarred oak table where we'd carved our initials as kids, and rules etched in stone. No alcohol, no tobacco, no sex before marriage. I'd worn those rules like armor, a point of pride that set me apart in a college world of frat parties and casual hookups. a shield against the chaos of youth. When I met Samantha at Boise State, a sophomore with auburn hair and a laugh that lit up the quad like fireworks on the 4th, I'd been upfront about my convictions. I was 22, gangly and earnest, and I'd told her over cheap diner coffee, black for me, cream and sugar for her, that I was waiting until marriage, my voice steady despite the flush creeping up my neck. She'd grinned, her green eyes sparkling with mischief, pulled me close across the sticky table, and whispered, "That's so sweet, Nathan. Our wedding night's gonna blow your mind." And it had, her patience, her passion. The way she'd guided me through that first, fumbling intimacy in a hotel room overlooking the river, the curtains fluttering in the June breeze, had sealed her in my heart as my forever. She'd had boyfriends before me, a string of flings from her freer days in high school and her first year at college. A cheerleader with a wild streak, she'd admitted once with a laugh, but I'd brushed it aside, trusting her vow to me under the church's stained glass, her white dress glowing in the afternoon light, her hand warm in mine. Our daughter, Abigail, arrived a year after the wedding. A squalling bundle of joy with Samantha's green eyes and my stubborn chin. Her first cry a melody that rewrote my world. Olivia followed 14 months later, her birth a grueling 18-hour ordeal that left Samantha drained and resolute. She had her tubes tied in the recovery room, declaring 2 was perfect with a tired smile, her hand squeezing mine as the anesthesia faded. I'd secretly hoped for a son, a little boy to toss a football with in the backyard under the cottonwoods. But Abby and Liv became my universe, their giggles and sticky hugs erasing any lingering what-ifs. I morphed into the hands-on dad, packing lunches with notes tucked inside on neon post-its, braiding Abby's hair before school with clumsy fingers, chauffeuring Liv to soccer practice under the setting sun, her cleats muddying the truck's floor mats. While Samantha's career skyrocketed after her maternity leave ended, her ambition a force I'd once admired. Her late nights at the office multiplied, her seminars and retreats stretching into weekends, sometimes a full week, her suitcase a constant fixture by the door, packed with pressed blazers and heels. She'd call every night from wherever she was, Portland, Seattle, once even Vegas, her voice warm but distant over the crackling line, and I'd swallow the unease gnawing at me, chalking it up to her drive, her need to climb the ladder, that fake, bubbly persona she'd adopted, the one I'd begged her to drop at home, grated like sandpaper on my nerves, a mask I couldn't crack no matter how I pleaded. "It's just business, babe," she'd say with that smirk, brushing off my complaints with a wave of her manicured hand, her nails a glossy red I'd once found sexy. Abby and Liv noticed too, her clipped responses when they asked for help with algebra or history projects, her distracted glances when they showed her their drawings or the medals from track meets. But infidelity? The thought never took root, never burrowed into the trust I'd built with her over a decade and a half. She knew cheating was my line in the sand, a betrayal I'd never forgive, a wound too deep to stitch closed. She'd heard me say it 100 times, seen the steel in my eyes when I'd laid it out early in our marriage. Dad greeted me at the door with a hug that smelled of leather and pine, his calloused hand clapping my shoulder with a reassuring thud, his flannel shirt a comforting constant from my childhood. "Coffee's hot," he said, ushering me inside, his voice rough but warm. Mom folded me into her arms, her sweater soft against my cheek, her blue eyes searching mine with a mother's intuition as we settled at the kitchen table, the same table where I'd done homework and carved pumpkins as a kid. I poured cream and maple syrup into my mug, a habit Dad and I shared since I was a boy, sneaking sips from his cup, and took a steadying sip, the sweetness a fleeting balm against the bitterness in my throat. "Let's pray first," Dad said, bowing his head, his voice steady as he led us in a quiet plea for guidance, for strength, his hands folded like a steeple. After a minute of silence, he looked up, his gray eyes piercing through the haze of my thoughts, steady as the mountains beyond the window. "What's going on, son?" he asked, his tone gentle but unyielding, a father's demand for truth. I set the mug down, my hands trembling as I met his gaze, the words I'd rehearsed on the drive spilling out raw and unfiltered. "I went to urgent care. I've got gonorrhea," I said, the word tasting like ash, bitter and final, a confession that hung heavy in the air. Mom's gasp was a soft, wounded sound, her hand flying to her mouth, her eyes welling with tears. Dad's face remained granite, his jaw tightening as he processed it, a faint tremor in his breath the only crack in his composure. "You been fooling around?" he asked, his voice low and deliberate, cutting through the tension like a knife, his eyes searching mine for any flicker of guilt. "No, Dad, never. Samantha's the only one. Always has been," I said, my voice cracking under the weight of the truth, my hands clenching into fists on the table. He nodded slowly, exhaling through his nose, his shoulders easing as belief settled in. "I believe you. Had to ask, had to hear it from you. What's your plan?" "Divorce?" I said, the decision crystallizing as I spoke, a path I couldn't unsee, a choice that felt like cutting away a limb to save the rest of me. No other way. The girls, Abby's 14, Liv's 13. They'll understand, eventually, but I can't trust her anymore, not after this. "How long's this been going on?" he pressed, leaning forward, his elbows resting on the table, his coffee untouched. "Found out this morning?" I said, my throat tightening as the reality sank deeper, a fresh wound bleeding anew with every word. "Adultery's grounds here," he said, standing to retrieve his Rolodex from the den, his boots thudding against the hardwood, a sound as familiar as my own heartbeat. Mom reached for my hand, her fingers cold and trembling against mine, her voice a whisper. "Oh, Nathan, I'm so sorry. Samantha seemed so—" She trailed off, tears brimming in her eyes, her faith in our little world shaken. "Perfect?" I finished, a hollow laugh escaping me, sharp and bitter, cutting through the quiet. "She had us all fooled, Mom. Me most of all." Dad returned, flipping through the worn cards until he found one, his thick fingers pausing as he pulled it free. "Rebecca Klein, family law attorney from church. Good woman, sharp as a tack, fair but fierce. I'll call her," he said, dialing with the certainty of a man who'd faced hard choices before, who'd taught me to meet them head-on. His voice was steady as he spoke to her assistant, then Rebecca herself, his tone firm but warm. "Becky, it's Dan Reynolds. My son needs you urgent. Today at 1:30? Perfect. Thanks," he said, hanging up and turning to me, the card outstretched. 1:30. Bring your financials, last 2 years' tax returns. Anything else you've got? Bank statements, whatever you can dig up. I drove home, the Boise River glinting under the midday sun, a cruel contrast to the storm brewing inside me, its waters mocking the turmoil I couldn't escape. Our house, a cozy, wood-paneled haven with a wraparound porch where we'd watched sunsets with the girls, felt foreign as I stepped inside, the silence oppressive, the air thick with the ghosts of a life I thought I'd known. I rifled through our filing cabinet in the study, my hands shaking as I pulled out tax returns, the paper edges biting into my fingers like accusations. 8 years ago, Samantha had insisted we file separately. Better deductions, she'd claimed, her smile convincing me it was a smart move, her logic airtight as she waved off my questions with a laugh. Now, the numbers stared back at me, her income dwarfing mine, bonuses vanishing into some unseen abyss, a trail I'd never followed, a trust I'd never questioned. A manila envelope tucked behind the folders caught my eye. Statements from a bank I didn't recognize, First Idaho Trust, its logo a stranger in our shared life. I flipped through them, my breath hitching as the totals climbed. $50,000 in 2017, $200,000 by 2020, $800,000 last year. Nearly $1 million stashed away over 8 years, a fortune hidden in plain sight, a secret she'd kept while I balanced our checkbook and fretted over grocery bills. My knees buckled, and I sank into the desk chair, the room spinning, my heart hammering against my ribs. A college fund for the girls? A retirement nest egg we'd never discussed? Or a ticket out of our life, a parachute she'd packed while I was blind? A betrayal woven into every late night she'd claimed was just work? My phone buzzed on the desk. Samantha texting, "Late night, big showing. Don't wait up." I stared at the screen, my thumb hovering over the reply, the words I'd typed 1,000 times. "Love you," sticking in my throat like a lie I couldn't swallow. Okay? I typed instead, hitting send with a cold finality, wondering if she'd notice the absence, if she'd feel the shift in the air between us. At 1:30, I sat across from Rebecca Klein in her downtown office, a sleek space with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, the distant mountains a faint outline against the sky, a view that mocked my grounded despair. She poured coffee from a carafe, her dark eyes warm but assessing as she slid a mug my way, the steam curling between us like a fragile truce. Dan called me this morning, she said, settling into her chair, her suit crisp and professional, her presence a steady anchor. What's happening? Samantha's cheating? I said, the words blunt and heavy, landing like stones on the polished table, each syllable a wound reopened. Her face softened with sympathy, a flicker of surprise in her gaze before she masked it with professionalism. I'm so sorry, Nathan. You two always seemed rock solid, she said, her voice genuine, a kindness that threatened to unravel me. Yeah, I thought so too, I said, bitterness seeping in, my fingers tightening around the mug until my knuckles whitened. I laid it out, the urgent care visit, the gonorrhea diagnosis that still felt like a bad dream, the secret account I'd uncovered like a buried landmine waiting to detonate. She listened, jotting notes on a legal pad, her pen moving with surgical precision, her brow furrowing as the story unfolded, a map of deception taking shape. Idaho's a no-fault divorce state, she said, leaning back, her tone measured, her eyes steady on mine. But adultery and the STD give us leverage, grounds to push for fault if we need to tilt the scales. Her lawyer might argue you contracted it elsewhere. We'll need to shut that down with evidence, prove your fidelity. The money? She could claim it's for the girl's future or a retirement plan you agreed to, but it smells like an escape fund, a safety net she's been weaving behind your back. Proving intent's tricky without hard proof. Paper trails, witnesses. I can hire a private investigator. It's not cheap, runs about $2,000 upfront, but it could clinch this, give us the ammunition we need. You in? Absolutely, I said, my resolve hardening like steel in a forge. The cost a small price for truth, for justice. Her car's a silver Lexus RX. Plate ID 9274. She's at open houses, retreats, client dinners. Always some excuse, I said, pulling out my phone and opening the tracker app I'd installed 6 months ago when she'd lost her phone at a conference in Spokane. A precaution I'd forgotten until this moment. A lifeline I hadn't known I'd need. Her dot pulsed at an address in Eagle, 20 miles north. A quiet suburb of sprawling homes and manicured lawns, far from any listing she'd mentioned. Perfect, Rebecca said, scribbling it down, her eyes lighting with strategy, a hunter sighting prey. She dialed her PI, a man named Vince she vouched for with a nod, her voice crisp and commanding as she relayed the details. Car, plate, location, habits. She hung up with a determined nod, her lips curving slightly, a spark of anticipation in her gaze. We'll keep this quiet. If she's hiding something, Vince'll find it. Photos, recordings, whatever's there to nail her. We shifted to the girls, the heart of my fight, the core of why I'd endure this hell. Abby and Liv, I want custody, I said, my voice firm, a vow I'd die to keep, my hands clenching on the table. Courts often favor mothers, she cautioned, tapping her pen against the pad, her tone a warning tempered by resolve. Especially with teens. 14 and 13 puts them close to choosing for themselves, but not quite there yet. We'll make your case adultery, neglect, the STD as a health risk to the household. Who's been primary caregiver? Me, I said, leaning forward, my voice steady with conviction. Samantha's out half the time, nights, weekends, sometimes gone a week for work. I'm the one at home, driving them to school, cooking dinner, making sure they're fed and safe, tucking them in when she's not there. That's strong, she said, nodding, a spark of approval in her gaze, her pen scratching a note. Are you certain they're yours biologically? She asked, her tone cautious, probing a wound I didn't want to touch, a question that felt like a betrayal of its own. I bristled, my jaw tightening, heat rising in my chest, my breath catching. They're mine, My name's on their birth certificates. I've raised them since day one, changed their diapers, taught them to ride bikes, sat through every recital and game. I said, my voice sharp, defensive, a father's fury flaring. She raised a hand, placating, her expression softening, her eyes meeting mine with understanding. I believe you, Nathan, but a paternity test could preempt any counterclaims she might throw. Say you're not fit because of doubt, turn it against you. It's just strategy, a shield to protect your rights. I exhaled, relenting, the logic cutting through my pride like a blade, leaving me raw but resolute. Fine, I'll do it, I said, the words heavy, a concession I hated but knew was necessary. The house, held in my parents' trust from my grandparents' estate, simplified property division, no mortgage to split, no messy equity fight to drag through the courts. She handed me a checklist, assets, debts, custody preferences, and a card for a DNA lab downtown, her handwriting neat and precise. Tell Samantha to get tested, she added, her tone grave, urgent, her eyes locking on mine. Her health's at risk too, and yours. HIV's a possibility with gonorrhea untreated, a shadow we can't ignore. I left Rebecca's office, paid her retainer with a check that felt like a ransom for my future. $3000, a dent in my savings but a step toward freedom, and swung by the lab for a DNA kit, the small plastic case a cold weight in my pocket, a tool I resented but needed. At First Idaho Trust, I confirmed the secret account's existence. Joint access severed years ago when she'd streamlined our finances. Her name alone on the statements now. A betrayal etched in ink, a fortune I'd never touched. Back home, I brewed a pot of coffee, the rich aroma a fleeting comfort as the girls burst through the door from the school bus, their backpacks thudding to the floor, their voices a sudden burst of life in the hollow space. "Dad, you're here," Abby exclaimed, her ponytail swinging as she dropped her bag by the couch, her track jacket slung over her shoulder. "You okay?" Liv asked, her brow furrowing, clutching her sketchbook like a shield, her quiet intensity a mirror of my own. "Rough day?" I said, forcing a smile that didn't reach my eyes, my voice steady despite the ache. "Pack some stuff. You're staying with Grandma and Grandpa for a few days," I said, keeping my tone even, a lifeline to normalcy. "Why?" Liv's voice quavered, her blue eyes, Samantha's eyes, searching mine, a flicker of fear shimmering in them. "Something's up with Mom," I said, keeping it vague, dodging the full truth for now, shielding them from the storm until I had to let it break. "We haven't fought yet, but it's coming." Abby's gaze sharpened, her arms crossing over her chest, a posture I'd seen 100 times when she was pissed or digging for answers. "She's cheating, isn't she?" she asked, her voice low, the question hitting like a punch, stealing my breath, her intuition cutting too close. "What makes you say that?" I asked, my voice tight, caught off guard by her clarity, my heart thudding. She shifted, uneasy, her sneakers scuffing the hardwood, her hands twisting together. "I've heard her on the phone, late at night in her office downstairs, that fake voice you hate. Can't wait to see you, babe," giggling all flirty, like she's someone else. "I didn't tell you. I know you hate rumors, and I didn't want to believe it," she said, her eyes dropping to the floor, guilt coloring her cheeks, her voice trembling with the weight of it. I pulled her into a hug, her hair soft against my chin, her frame trembling slightly, a daughter caught in a war she didn't start. "It's okay, kiddo. You've noticed her pulling away too?" I asked, glancing at Liv, drawing her in. "Yeah?" Liv piped up, hugging her sketchbook tighter, her voice small but firm. "She's snappy, like we're in her way. Barely looks at my drawings anymore. Just says nice without even seeing them." I pulled out the DNA kit, the swabs and vials stark against the kitchen counter, a clinical intrusion into our fragile moment, and explained as I handed them each one, my hands steady despite the tremor inside. "Legal stuff. You're my girls. I just need proof for court, to make sure no one can question it, to keep you with me," I said, my voice calm, a father's promise woven into the words. "Divorce?" Abby asked, her voice small, the word hanging heavy between us, a shadow over the kitchen. Looks like it, I admitted, meeting her gaze, letting her see the truth in my eyes. Can't you forgive her? Liv whispered, her lip trembling, her innocence piercing me like a blade, her hope a fragile thing I hated to crush. Not this time, I said, my throat tightening, the truth too raw to soften, too jagged to wrap in comfort. It's serious. I had to see a doctor today, and it's not just a cold. Abby's eyes widened, a flicker of understanding passing over her face, a maturity beyond her years settling in. But she didn't press, her silence a mercy I clung to. Let's get these samples done, I said, swabbing their cheeks gently, then my own, sealing the vials with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, each motion a step toward a future I couldn't yet see. Pack for a few nights, homework too. We leave in 20, I said, forcing normalcy into my tone. A lifeline to routine as they trudged upstairs, their footsteps heavy, their whispers trailing behind them. The drive to my folks was quiet, the girls' resolve palpable in the tense air of the truck, the Boise skyline fading behind us as the foothills rose ahead. A sanctuary I needed as much as they did. If you divorce, we're staying with you, Abby said, her tone fierce, her hands clenched in her lap, her jaw set like mine when I was angry. Me too, Liv echoed, her voice softer but no less certain, her sketchbook resting on her knees, her fingers tracing the edges. I'll fight for it, I promised, my grip tightening on the wheel, my voice a vow etched in steel. But courts lean toward moms sometimes, they think it's best. We'll see what happens. But I'll do everything I can. I hate her right now, Abby muttered, staring out the window at the passing pines. Her anger a mirror to the fire burning in me, a blaze I couldn't douse. I didn't correct her. Her words echoed too closely to my own heart, a rage I couldn't tame, a betrayal too fresh to temper with reason. At my parents', Dad met us on the porch, hugging the girls as they hauled their bags inside. His broad frame a steady presence, his flannel shirt brushing their shoulders. Mom emerged, her apron dusted with cinnamon from baking cookies, pulling me into a warm embrace that smelled of vanilla and home. Her arms a refuge I didn't realize I'd missed so much. I'm dropping these at the lab, I said, holding up the kit, the plastic case a cold reminder of the battle ahead. You okay? Dad asked, his voice gruff with worry, his hand resting on my shoulder, his grip firm. As good as I can be, I said, forcing a half smile, my eyes stinging. We'll pray for you, he said, his eyes steady, a promise rooted in faith. Call us after you talk to Samantha. Let us know what she says. Will do, I said, hugging Mom before heading out. The weight of their support a small buoy in the storm, a lifeline I clung to as I drove away. The lab was a quick stop, a sterile room buzzing with efficiency. Results promised by Friday, the receptionist's smile a faint reassurance as she took the kit, her fingers deft as she logged it. Driving home, I felt the need to peel back more layers of Samantha's life, to understand the depth of the lie I'd lived, to arm myself with every shard of truth I could grasp. I called her younger sister, Julia, connecting my Bluetooth as the truck rumbled along the quiet streets, the city lights flickering on in the dusk. Hey, Nate, she answered, her cheer a stark contrast to the darkness swallowing me, her voice bright like it always was. Rough day, I said, my voice flat, cutting through her warmth. Got a sec. Always for you, she said, her tone softening, sensing the edge in me, the strain I couldn't hide. I laid it out. The STD, the suspicion, keeping it short and brutal, each word a stone dropping into the silence, a weight I needed her to share. Oh my God, she breathed, her shock palpable even through the line, her voice catching. She's back to her old tricks. Sam was wild in high school and college. New guy every week, no loyalty, a heartbreaker who thrived on the chase. She swore you changed her, called you her forever after the wedding, said you were the one who tamed her. I thought she'd settled, that you were her anchor, she said, her voice thick with regret, a sister's guilt surfacing. Wish I'd known, I said, my voice hollow, the past shifting under me like quicksand. Every memory I cherished now suspect. Not your fault, she said, firm, cutting through my spiral. I should have warned you, but she seemed so different with you, happy, grounded. Can she stay with me if you kick her out? Short term, she said, hesitating, a sigh crackling through. Tom's not thrilled about drama. He's got the kids to think about, and his patience is thin, but we'll figure it. Call when it's time. Thanks, Jules. The girls are holding up. Stronger than me right now, I said, a faint pride cutting through the pain, a flicker of light in the dark. You raised them right, she said, her voice warm again. Hang in there, Nate. Call if you need me. I warmed leftovers. Chicken casserole Mom had sent home last Sunday, the dish still warm from her oven. Sipping coffee as the clock ticked past 6:30, the house too quiet without the girls' chatter. Their absence a void I felt in my bones. Rebecca's call jolted me from my daze, her number flashing on my screen like a beacon in the night. Nathan, PI's got something, she said, her voice taut with excitement. A hunter closing in on her quarry. Samantha's been busy. 3 men since noon today. Photos, video, audio clips. Skip the video, listen to the last audio segment. It's a gut punch, but it's what we need. Pure dynamite, she said, her words clipped and urgent, a thrill in her tone. I booted up my laptop on the kitchen table, my hands unsteady as I opened the email attachment, the file downloading with agonizing slowness, each second stretching my nerves tighter. The audio crackled to life. A man's voice, smooth and probing, unfamiliar. A stranger in my world. You're married, huh? The ring. Samantha's laugh, light and careless, sliced through me like a blade. A sound I'd once loved now twisted into something cruel. For now. You too. Open marriage, he said, casual, a shrug in his tone. Your husband, no? Not a clue, she said, her tone dripping with amusement. A mockery of our life, a dagger in my back. He's oblivious, thinks I'm a saint, Mother Teresa in heels. I taught him everything. 23-year-old virgin when we met, all churchy and pure, wouldn't touch a beer or curse if I dared him to. Doesn't drink, doesn't swear. God, he's so straight it's almost funny. Good dad, though, handles the girls so I don't have to, keeps them out of my hair. Beyond that, dull as dishwater, predictable as sunrise, no spark left. My chest tightened, each word a dagger twisting deeper. Her voice a stranger's, a woman I didn't know wearing my wife's skin. The girl's his? The man asked, curiosity lacing his tone, a question I'd never dared to ask myself. Maybe not, she said, shrugging audibly. The sound a careless flick, a dismissal of everything I'd built. Doesn't matter, he believes they are. That's what counts. Keeps him tethered. Keeps him playing house while I live. How long you been at this? He pressed, his voice lowering, a conspirator now. Since the start, she said breezily, a confession tossed like confetti, light and meaningless to her. 15 years, and he's never suspected, never even sniffed it. Never been with anyone else, how would he know what to look for? He's blind, and I've kept him that way. Why stay? For now, till the girls hit college, for 5 years tops. Courts give moms custody, but I don't want them dragging me down. Teenagers are a hassle, all hormones and attitude. After that, freedom, parties, a cruise, maybe Costa Rica, somewhere warm where I can breathe. I've got cash stashed, a nice little pile, almost $1 million, she said, pride creeping in. A boast that turned my stomach. This weekend? He asked, a hint of eagerness, a predator circling. I'll tell Nathan it's a work retreat. Some bullshit about a conference. He'll buy it. He always does, swallows every excuse I feed him like it's gospel, she said, giggling, a sound that churned my gut, while rising in my throat as the audio cut off. The silence was deafening, tears burning my eyes as I stared at the screen, the depth of her betrayal sinking in like poison seeping into my veins. A slow bleed I couldn't stop. 15 years, a lie from the first, I do. A performance I'd applauded while she laughed behind the curtain. A fool's paradise I'd built brick by brick. I dialed Rebecca, my voice raw, barely controlled, the phone slick with sweat in my hand. Heard it? I said, the words scraping out, each syllable a wound. What's next? We torch it, she said, her resolve matching mine, a fire in her tone that matched the blaze in me. Divorce papers are drafted, fault grounds, adultery, health endangerment, the works. No suing the guys. Idaho law doesn't allow alienation claims. But this audio's gold. A dagger to her defense. Proof she can't dodge. She won't run on her terms, Nathan. She'll crash on ours. Good? I said, wiping my face with my sleeve, the tears hot against my skin. A release I couldn't hold back. Thanks, Becky, do it. Take care of your girls, she said, her voice softening before the line went dead. A command I took to heart. Samantha called at 7:45, her name flashing like a warning on my phone. A summons I dreaded but couldn't ignore. Hey, I answered, my tone flat, a wall between us, my voice a stranger's even to me. You okay? She asked, her cheer forced, that fake lilt I'd come to loathe grating against my raw nerves. Bad day? I said, offering nothing more, my words a shield. You closed a deal, big commission, she said, chipper as ever, oblivious or uncaring. Her voice a performance I saw through now. Home in an hour, she added casual, as if nothing had shifted. Sure, I said, no warmth, no invitation, my heart a stone in my chest. Love you, she said, the words hollow, a reflex I doubted she felt, a lie she'd perfected. Yeah, I replied, ending the call with a tap, my thumb lingering on the screen, the finality of it a quiet cut. I printed the PI's photos, 4 shots of her with different men, timestamped that day, their faces blurred but her smile unmistakable, a grin I'd once cherished now a taunt, and arranged them on the kitchen table, a silent accusation waiting for her arrival, the envelope of evidence a guillotine poised to fall, its blade gleaming in my mind. The clock ticked past 8:45, then 9:30. No Samantha. No headlights sweeping the driveway. No jingle of keys in the lock. I paced, coffee cold in my mug, her absence fueling a mix of anger and worry. A cocktail of emotions I couldn't untangle, a storm brewing in the quiet. At 10, I called her cell, straight to voicemail, her cheery greeting mocking me. A ghost of the woman I'd loved. Call me, I said terse, my voice clipped, a demand she wouldn't hear. A text followed. Where are you? No reply, the silence stretching like a taut wire, snapping my patience. By 11:30, dread overtook rage. Car trouble? An accident? Worse? The house phone rang at 11:45, shattering the stillness, the shrill sound jolting me upright, my heart leaping into my throat. Nathan Reynolds? A woman's voice asked, calm but urgent, cutting through the haze. Yes, I said, my voice breaking, my pulse racing. This is Carla Evans from St. Luke's Hospital. Your wife, Samantha Reynolds, was in an accident. She's in the ICU. Can you come now? My stomach dropped, the room tilting, my breath shallow. Is she okay? I asked, clinging to hope, my voice a plea. The doctor will explain, she said, sidestepping, her tone a wall I couldn't breach. Come to the front desk, hurry. I grabbed my jacket, stuffing the photos and my wedding ring into an envelope, my hands shaking as I scrawled her name across it in jagged letters, the ink smudging under my thumb. The drive to St. Luke's was a blur, the city lights streaking past like tears, my mind racing with possibilities. Anger warring with fear, betrayal tangling with the faint echo of love I couldn't quite kill, a thread I couldn't sever. At the ICU desk, a tired-looking clerk with graying hair directed me to a waiting officer. His uniform crisp despite the late hour, his badge glinting under the fluorescence. Mr. Reynolds? He asked, extending a hand, his grip firm, steadying me. Officer Tate, your wife's car was hit by a drunk driver at 9th and State. Broadside collision. Car's a wreck, towed to impound. He said, handing me a card with the tow company's number, his voice matter-of-fact but not unkind. A doctor approached, his coat pristine, his face etched with fatigue, his eyes shadowed from too many long nights. "I'm Dr. Paul Carter," he said, guiding me to a small room off the hall, the walls a dull beige that closed in around me. "Samantha's got multiple fractures. Ribs, femur, internal bleeding, and a severe head injury. She's in a medically induced coma to stabilize her, reduce swelling on her brain. There's more. Preliminary tests suggest HIV. We're running confirmations, but it'll take days. You should test tomorrow. Urgent care missed it, but we caught it early here," he said, his voice steady but grave, each word a stone piling on my chest. The floor tilted beneath me, my breath shallow, my hands clenching the arms of the chair. "How long's the coma?" I asked, clinging to facts to anchor me, to keep me from drowning. 10 days to 2 weeks, he said, his eyes meeting mine, unflinching. "Maybe longer, depending on her brain scans. Swelling's the wild card." I entered her room, the beep of machines a grim soundtrack, the air thick with disinfectant and despair, a sterile chill that seeped into my bones. She lay swathed in bandages, her leg in a cast up to her hip, her face bruised and stitched, unrecognizable from the woman I'd loved, the wife I'd trusted, a stranger beneath the medical tape and gauze. Tubes snaked from her arms, her chest rising and falling with mechanical precision. A puppet on strings I couldn't cut. I slipped off my wedding ring, the gold band cold against my skin. A weight I'd carried for 15 years, now a shackle I shed, and wrote her name on the envelope with a trembling hand, tucking the ring inside with the photos. Evidence of her betrayal, a final farewell sealed in paper. "Give her this when she wakes," I told the nurse, a young woman with kind eyes and a tired smile, placing it on a tray by her bed, my voice steady despite the tremor in my chest. I eased Samantha's rings from her swollen fingers, the diamonds glinting dully under the fluorescent lights. A promise broken now, just cold metal in my pocket, a relic of a life I couldn't reclaim. "Goodbye, Sam," I whispered, my voice breaking. A prayer and a curse tangled together, a farewell to the woman I'd thought she was. The nurse's sympathetic nod followed me out, her gaze heavy with understanding, a silent witness to my unraveling. The next day, I tested at Dr. Matthews' office, negative for HIV so far, the antibiotics working on the gonorrhea, a small mercy in the wreckage, a flicker of relief in the dark. I called my parents from the parking lot, spilling everything. The accident, the infidelity, the secret fund. My voice raw as I fought tears, the phone pressed hard against my ear. "Send me the evidence," Dad said, his tone steel, a soldier readying for battle, his faith in me unshaken. I emailed the PI's files from my phone, my hands shaking as the attachments uploaded, each click a step toward closure, a brick in the wall I was building around my heart. Rebecca finalized the divorce papers, her efficiency a lifeline, a map through the chaos, and I rented Samantha an apartment with funds from our joint account. A ground floor unit with a garage in a quiet complex near the river. A space she'd never call home with me again. A clean break I forced into being. Julia met me at the house, her husband Tom staying back with their kids, and we packed Samantha's clothes, her jewelry, the wedding album I couldn't bear to keep. A relic of a lie I cherished, its leather cover mocking me as I shoved it into a box. The DNA results came Friday. Abby and Liv were mine, their profiles matching mine down to the last marker. A bittersweet relief that steadied me amidst the chaos. A truth I could hold on to when everything else crumbled. 2 weeks later, Samantha woke, her coma lifting like a curtain on the final act, a reckoning I couldn't delay. I drove to the hospital with Julia and a process server. A stoic man in a cheap suit with a camera slung around his neck. The girls refusing to come despite my gentle prodding. Their silence a wall I respected. "She's awake," the nurse said, leading us to her room, her sneakers squeaking on the polished floor, her voice a quiet guide. Samantha lay propped up, pale and frail, tubes still trailing from her arms, her eyes widening as I entered, a flicker of recognition cutting through the haze of painkillers, her face a map of bruises and regret. The server handed her the papers, his voice monotone, cutting through the tension. "You've been served," he said, snapping a photo with his phone, the flash stark against her pallor, a moment frozen in time. "You couldn't wait?" she rasped, her voice cracking, her hands trembling as she clutched the documents, her eyes darting to mine, pleading. You want it out, I said, my tone cold, unyielding, a judge delivering a verdict. I just sped it up, 4 years early by your own timeline. The girls know. They hate you right now, and I don't blame them. I'm taking custody, full-time. Apartments ready, half our savings minus rent and deposit, all set up. Cars totaled, but insurance'll pay you out. Sign and you'll get your secret funds half, $475, 000, frozen until you do. I said, laying out the terms like a contract, no room for negotiation. My voice a blade cutting through her tears. She sobbed, tears streaking her bruised cheeks. Her voice a broken plea, fragile and desperate. Nathan, I'm sorry. I love you, I swear, she said, reaching for me, her hand frail against the sheets, a ghost of the strength she'd once wielded. Sign? I said, stepping back, unmoved. The love I'd felt a ghost I couldn't resurrect, a memory drowned in her lies. Julia stepped forward, her face hard, her arms crossed. You lied to us all, Nathan, the girls, me, your own sister. I'll help you move in when you're out, then I'm done. Fix this mess yourself, she said, her voice ice, turning away as Samantha's sobs grew louder, a wail that followed us out. 3 months later, the divorce was final. Papers signed in a hospital room, her signature shaky but binding, a legal severing that set me free. I tested negative for HIV after a final round. The $475,000 from her stash split into college funds for Abby and Liv, a future I'd secure for them alone, a legacy built on my terms. They're my anchor, their laughter and resilience pulling me through the dark days, their refusal to see Samantha a silent pact between us, a bond forged in the fire of her betrayal. She's rebuilding alone, her real estate career limping along at a new firm after her old one cut ties. Whispers of her indiscretions trailing her like shadows, a reputation she can't outrun. I'm dating again cautiously. A woman from church, a widow named Claire with a quiet strength and a smile that warms me. Her gray eyes soft where Samantha's were sharp, a step toward something new. The girls tease me about it. Abby rolling her eyes with a grin. Liv sketching Claire's face in her book with careful strokes. But they're my core, my reason, my North Star. Life's a jagged road, potholed and steep, but with them, I'm finding my way back, one unsteady step at a time.